Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this episode actually we will discuss about recycling and this kind of things. We have our panelist as well as our policy analyst, Dr. William. We have Professor Donalds, we have Mr. Alex, and Mr. Robs. We will discuss on the recycling, downsizing, and upskilling. I want to start with Mr. Rob. So, how are you today, and how you want to introduce today's sessions, especially downsizing, upscaling, and recycling?
Sure. Kind of a broad category group. With regard to recycling, the current trend, at least in the technology industry, is something called the circular economy. This trend suggests that whatever you build, you also recycle. Much of the industry is still in the midst of really trying to get their arms around this, and they're doing things like they'll recycle somebody else's stuff for everything that they build. Not truly circular, but at least it's delaying the introduction of some of these materials into landfills, and particularly the ocean. And of course, we also have a major effort to use ocean-borne plastics. This has been a huge hit with the technology companies to actually take plastics that might otherwise end up in the ocean or that have been retrieved in the ocean and then turn them into products. But the end game is to really take everything that they build and then when it's done, completely recycle it into something else, so nothing is going to landfills. And we're still at least a decade off, I think, from making that happen, though it is resulting in some really interesting new designs and capabilities. It's crossing over to areas like automotive, where they're talking now, instead of having things cycle through every 3 to 4 years, maybe you keep the automobile long term and you replace the components that are aging out. We'll probably see most of those designs actually showing up in automobiles towards the end of the decade or first part of next decade. So at least the technology industry is trying to wrap their head around this. I don't think it's like a lot of people are going far enough, fast enough, but at least they're making progress.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Rob. Dr. William, how do you want to introduce this problem and solution, especially recycling, upcycling, and downsizing? Can you unmute yourself?
I don't know that I can introduce the problem. I think everybody knows, or at least in segment by segment, get what our challenges are. What I can say is I'm optimistic, only because, as Rob said, it's a big topic. But what I do know is we're going to figure it all out. In this sense, we're going to take it step by step, whether it's the ecosystem or how we figure it out. You know, there was some time ago, and I know I've been missing on this stage, when I said all hands, all ideas on the table. Now we have it. And I'm just sorry that I couldn't say earlier, you now have the entire American economy behind whatever ideas are. So that's how I introduce. And I do want to make special note, if I may, Professor Donald, because I've missed you. No, Professor Donald, I've missed you. And as professional courtesy, I throw and I defer to you.
Yes, Professor Donald.
Well, I've got to say that this is not my main field of expertise. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward really to hear what Alex says, because this is something that he's incredibly passionate about. But as you know, my area is social science, and I find it interesting, the technology, because I worked with a company that was that made an artificial intelligence system with mesh networks so that they could tell whether trash cans were full or not. And in the course of working with them, we met with the recycling heads of the recycling for Santa Clara County and a couple of other places like that. And I got to talk to them about their problems. And at this point right now, there's still a big people problem. So if I take something that I want to recycle and throw it away and recycle it, if I don't clean the organic material out of it, it can actually wreck the whole recycling batch, and that recycling batch winds up in the landfill. So the technology as of now to be able to do real single stream recycling, which is the idea that you could throw everything in one pile and automatically it would be separated on all its components, hasn't been happening yet. And so the main situation that we have is that people have to be able to separate these things. And I don't even know. I mean, I look at try and find the little recycling thing on a bottle or something to know whether I can even recycle it at all. And it's difficult to know which trash can to put it in and things like that. So there's a lot of technological things that are starting to be worked out. But I'll be really interested to hear what Alex has to say about this, because this is definitely his main field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Alex.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you for deferring all of the questions and the pressure on me. So I don't know if this is my topic of expertise, but it is a very important topic. I mean, we live on a planet of finite resources, and most of us know that. All of us know that we're dealing with a global pollution crisis. This global pollution, I'm just waking up, just woke up like 20 minutes ago. This global pollution crisis is a direct result of us living outside of our means. I do think it has a direct correlation with capitalism and consumerism. Some people might argue me about that, but yeah, so let's just focus on consumerism. So we have this economy and we produce goods or services. A lot of those are goods. And if it's not a food product, most of it, just about everything that we've created, every man-made product is eventually going to end up back in the environment. That's excluding some equipment and technology that we send up to space or for space exploration. So we create all this stuff, and unfortunately, a very, very, very large percentage of it goes back into the landfill or just pollutes our environment and eventually runs out into the ocean. So right now, there's estimates kind of universally agreed upon that that we're only recycling 9% of whatever's recyclable around the world. That's really low, and we have a lot of room for improvement. As Donald mentioned, it is confusing. Is this recyclable? Is it not recyclable? We don't even have the technology to recycle black plastic items. I mean, their machines just don't read black. So every time you get, your Impossible Burger, it looks all nice. It's all like not a meat product. It's in black plastic. It's not even recyclable. So that's difficult to know that. And then there's the whole, it says compostable, but that's actually not compostable unless it's incinerated or raised to a certain temperature in an industrial composting machine. We don't even have that in Santa Cruz County where I'm at, so it's not really compostable. It's just a form of greenwashing. And then it is complicated, like Donald mentioned, because, is it county recycling? Is it city recycling? Because it's two completely different processes. The city recycling here in Santa Cruz is really limited. It's just the basic containers and what they accept. But the county recycling expands to batteries and different types of plastics, and they're able to recycle a lot more because they have a larger market. So there is a difference, and to know those differences, or to differentiate between city and county recycling, is important. So then you're not doing that wishful recycling where you just throw everything in, hoping it gets recycled. So in Europe, I loved how you pay more for the container. So you have more individual initiative to turn it back in to get that 25 cents back for that container, that beverage container for your store credit. Here in California, we pay 5 cents for that beverage. And if you live somewhere else in the world, that's really low. Most people, unless you're really, really poor or you're homeless, you're not going to recycle a beverage for 5 cents. It's just not worth your time and energy to collect all of those or separate them and organize them and take them down and turn them in wherever you turn them in, because it's too much effort. You'd rather work for, an hour of your time to make $10 an hour, a lot easier. So I do think that we need to increase the price of recycling containers larger than 5 cents. I think we should do what Europe's doing. They should be 25 cents. We should have a universal standard so we can turn them into those machines, get that credit immediately. I also think we need to transition to reusable glass containers like they used to do in the olden days, to where you turn it back in. It's just more sustainable. Again, this is we might not know everything about this topic, but this is an important topic that we do need to have these conversations. So I appreciate this panel. Downsizing is another category. When you have all this stuff, people have stuff. They're hoarders. They own stuff. They buy things. They collect things. So whenever you have something in your house, I think you got to decide, what it is. Do I need it? What am I going to do with it? Is it going to sit on a shelf? Or if you're in the process of downsizing and becoming a minimalist, you decide, okay, I have all these things. What should I do with them? I want to get rid of them. I'm done with them. So you got to decide, what is the lowest environmental impact for everything that you have once you get rid of it? Is it, because you don't want it just to end up in the landfill. You obviously don't want to just throw it right back in the environment or a creek. So you got to think like, okay, should I sell it and make money back from it? Post it on Craigslist, eBay, however you want to sell that. Facebook Marketplace, or should you recycle it? Is that the best option? Are you going to recycle it, through the city, or are you going to take it to the dump? Because they take larger things of plastic at the city dump here than they do in the containers out front of your house. Or are you going to, donate it to like a nonprofit, Goodwill, Salvation Army? Is it going to go back into the market that way? You're not getting money for it, but it's helping get back. Or are you going to donate it to a homeless person? Or are you going to upcycle it? Upcycling is a term. We are taking a product that you no longer need and you turn it back into something that's usable. I have the definition somewhere right here. It's really cool. So I think upcycling is something that we need to do more of. A lot of artists upcycle trash and they turn it into art. There's people in developing countries upcycling a lot of the stuff we don't want. We send it back to their country. I mean, tires are constantly upcycled into shoes and different things. There's that viral video and meme where the girl's recycling plastic and she's turning it into bricks that are 5 times stronger than concrete. So whenever we're downsizing, we just got to think, what's the best thing to do with all this stuff that we have? Organic material should be composted, and recycled material should be recycled. Stuff that's still good shouldn't go to a landfill. It should go to like a donation center, gift it to a homeless person, or give it to a friend that needs it, because then they're not buying that brand new item again. They got your item. And I have some more notes, but I guess I'll pass it off to someone else that would like to speak or add something like
Okay.
William would like to add.
Yes, Dr. William, I think he want to add some point. Can you unmute yourself, Dr. William?
Okay, actually, I had this question, and I apologize for trying to interrupt here, but here's my question for Rob and Professor Donald and then Alex. But look, General Motors said they were going to get rid of gas-powered vehicles for good. That's one. In 5 years or 6 years or whatever. That's one. 2, you have an administration that's behind that. 3, I don't know, and this is a legitimate question, at least for me, because I don't know. What does that mean for Rob, how you're looking at things, and Professor Donald, how you're looking at things, and then Alex, how you're looking at things? Because I literally do not know. But when I heard that announcement, all electric vehicles, well, gas vehicles in 5 years, as we recycle. So, Rob, back to 3. I mean, don't mind me. That was my concern, because it seemed to me that was a bit earth-shaking.
Well, it certainly is. It's the existing automotive market in the United States is built around ICE vehicles, internal combustion engines, and making a broad pivot to electrics is certainly a major commitment by General Motors, and the date they're going to complete it by, at least in their proposal, is 2035. Of course, it's going to depend on because they'll have a new CEO by then. The typical CEOs in major companies last about a decade. So it's pretty clear that they'll have a new CEO and probably a new executive team, and we'll see if they hold to this. But it's a major change. The issue, of course, is that means that pretty much every gas car that gets replaced with an electric is going to go and be resold, and the market for gasoline cars at that time is going to be substantially less, because the market will have, by 2035, will have largely shifted, particularly in the EU, which is far more aggressive than the US. Will have shifted to electric, and so what will you do with gas-powered cars if nobody wants to buy them and gas stations are no longer as frequent? It's probably going to happen the same. I mean, the models we've been using in the industry are the same models that we created when we pivoted from horses as our primary mode of transportation to cars, and the pivot actually happened relatively quickly, and then the horse-drawn carriages, buggies, wagon train vehicles, they were discarded. You had no more use for them. Tack and stuff, leather and the rest, because we had a recreational group of horseback riders that remained to a certain extent. And I expect we'll have a recreational group of automotive drivers as well, but that may only consume 2, maybe most 3% of the automobile. So we're going to have a major influx of cars being disposed of at a higher rate than normal, at least during the cycle, and then there'll be an electrics. Now, the good thing about electrics is they're being mostly designed with the idea of being upgradable. Tesla started that particular trend with the idea that you create components and then you can upgrade the components. I believe you can still pay something like $25,000 if you have a Tesla and have it upgraded to the current version. Obviously, that won't work if they change models, but that limits the amount of material going into landfills. Oh, and one comment on tires. Interestingly enough, we've discovered that tires actually make a good road service. One of the hardest things to dispose of is tires and rubber. We've had several situations here and across the world where dumps have burned the material, which is by no means healthy. But we found that we can actually use it for other things like road surfaces. It makes a good road surface. It actually lasts longer and better. And while you're still kind of introducing it into the environment, at least you're not wasting the material. I think we're going to find, though, as we move off of petrochemical for gas, then a lot of things suddenly become less profitable. Disposable plastics, which are petrochemical based, if you're not already making gasoline, so this becomes the throwout material that you're repurposing, then it's going to be pretty hard to justify an awful lot of the plastics. They're going to go up in price because they're no longer a byproduct of gasoline. They are the product. And the end result is they should go up substantially in terms of price. And I think we will go back then to using renewable materials. The reason we stopped doing it was because the economics of the disposal materials wasn't put back into the system, and so so plastics became significantly cheaper than washing and reusing bottles. And of course, there were some health issues with regard to the bottles no longer being, getting chips and stuff in them, where bacteria could grow. But those were relatively minor against some of the other issues. And so as we get off petrochemicals and move to electrics, I think it's going to almost automatically solve an awful lot of the waste problems we have that are related to plastics, because it's going to make plastics unprofitable.
Okay, Dr. Sharif, if I may, I just want to follow up with Professor Donald.
Okay.
Professor Donald, how does that work in terms of the psychology? I mean, we're talking a sharp pivot, mental, for society. How are you thinking about it, and what do you see? And don't mind me, I apologize. I'm just so excited about what I've heard and what. Well, Dr. Sharif, I apologize. Professor Donald.
No problem. Continue. Can you unmute Professor Donald?
There we go. Now you can hear me. People, there's going to be inertia. I mean, people change. I think if you've ever driven a Tesla, I don't drive, but I've ridden in them, you would see that they are a dream car. I mean, Consumers Report was rating cars, and they rated Tesla over 100. They had to redo their rating system because Teslas were so much better than any car that they'd ever evaluated in the entire history of Consumers Report. So people are good, and they're high status, which is really important. So people are going to tend to shift to electric cars. Besides just the electric cars, it's important to realize that many of these are semi-autonomous right now, but are rapidly becoming autonomous, which means that they're not only electric cars, but they don't even need to have drivers. And that's going to lead to a whole entirely new system where people just don't have cars. I mean, and it's not that new because in New York City, my brother lived in New York City for 7 years, and he had a car, but he kept it in Connecticut. And so when he wanted to do a road trip up to Maine or something like that, he would take the train to Connecticut where he parked his car and take his car, but he never used it inside the city. And so in San Francisco and New York and places like that, people don't even have cars. I mean, lots of people, majority. So, but you can go to some place like Texas, and they're saying, you're going to take away my 4x4 with my cold, dead hands. And I have a rifle, God damn it. I'm going to protect my liberty and my freedom. So that's just something that's just going to have to take time. Dr. William was asking me about what I thought about the new administration and the changes. I'm hopeful, but I mean, in the back of my mind is that 74 million people voted for Trump. And those 74 million people are going to do as much as they can to continue to disrupt things. And I think in the long run, they're going to lose. But I think at least in the short term, we've still got a lot of disruption that's going to be taking place that's pointless. It's just disruption for disruption's sake. I would be really interested to hear what Alex has to say about the recycling of the electric cars, because environmentalists criticize electric cars quite a bit. So that's my belief is that we'll get there, but it's not going to be as quick as we hope.
Mr. Alex?
Yes. So because of public pressure and negative PR, it really drives the direction of innovation and recycling, and them taking that initiative to I mean, there's how do I say this? Coca-Cola just switched their plastic containers to like 100% recyclable containers, or they're going to by a certain year, or they have, I don't know, it was on CNN last night. So Coca-Cola is their beverage container has now been found like around the world, like, you know, in the Arctic Circle, at the lowest depths of the ocean, and obviously it's polluting the world everywhere because people drink Coca-Cola. But because of bad press, and they wanted to have like a good image, their, you know, PR department, or, you know, the few environmentalists that work for Coca-Cola said, hey, we should do this. We should switch. You know, we're getting like a lot of bad press, and it encouraged, whatever it was, it encouraged them to switch. Whether it is local regulation, government regulation, which is unlikely. It was just, I think it's just our perception of that company and the negative things that we had to say, or the criticism regarding that. So there was a lot of criticism with electric vehicles and the batteries, and Tesla's batteries now are 100% recyclable. And Tesla isn't the only electric car company, but they are one of the largest, and their, you know, net wealth or whatever is much larger than like I don't know, like the top 5 other major car companies in the world. Now Rob couldn't correct any of this, of course, and we don't have Kurt here, but I'm relatively positive that all of the Tesla batteries are recyclable. But again, Tesla is not the only electric car company. There's a lot of other new and upcoming electric cars, and it's not just through Ford and Toyota and GM and all of the other major car companies. There's getting a call. There's new electric car companies that like I've never heard of, where they're starting basically from scratch. I think that is the direction, and we all are going to learn more as we go along. Tesla's information and their technology and their batteries and a lot of what they do is open source. So that'll be interesting to see how Tesla continues to develop and how they do provide things open source so that other car companies can follow along. And I wanted to say, the reason why it's important to recycle car tires and stuff like Rob just mentioned is because it eliminates us from extracting new material or producing more. So it's just more energy efficient. And there's been people in the past that have doubted recycling. Is it really more efficient, or is it better just to use raw material? And there's been I keep getting calls. So there's been a lot of statistical information and studies done by major universities that have found recycling is more efficient, and that's why we do it, and that's why they're even able to give that 5 cents for that material. But as far as like creating the roads, for instance, with the tires, that's a lot more efficient than extracting other material, just using recycled material. And they're actually using it for, I don't know if I agree with it because it's kind of toxic, but they use it for the asphalts for the AstroTurf in sports arenas and soccer fields and kids playgrounds. And that's another huge way that tires have been recycled. So that's what I want to add right now to this conversation. Did that answer everyone's question?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Rob, you come up with some of the good example. Rob, hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're breaking up a little bit though.
Yeah. Okay. Like you come up some of the good example about Coca-Cola. Like Coca-Cola moved from plant-based bottle to recycling ones, as well as this Tesla the recycling method, especially I think that for their tire recycling and this kind of things. I think not only Tesla, I think that BMW and many companies also doing work. China also working in the same place. So my questions to you, that how you see this kind of like business futures, like what will happen. Like first we saw that many of the unique business happening in the developed nations, then the developing nations actually engage with this kind of business. But recycling, yes, I believe that personally I have experience to develop some recycling project, especially waste to energy, and it's happening in Asia Pacific right now. So what the futures, if we think that business opportunities, how we can analyze this business for the next few years?
Well, we have to find a way to profit for recycling. Many of the, at least here in the United States, many of the recycling organizations are running in the red, and significantly so. China is no longer accepting the materials that they used to accept, and there are stories of barges of used baby diapers floating around all over the world, and that stuff's just nasty. It's like, I don't blame them. I wouldn't want those things either. And then we've got all kinds of issues with regard to people flushing stuff down toilets they shouldn't. This screwing up our water reclamation project. So in the end, what we're seeing is an industry that's kind of wrapping its head around how do you do recycling right. I wish I could point to somebody that was just doing it perfectly, but I can't. And it really starts with the design of the underlying products. The products have to be designed to come apart easily, to be recycled easily, and yet they still have to be sturdy, and they have to hold up through their life of service, which has been one of the problems with coming up with plastics that properly degrade, a lot of times those things could degrade prematurely. You've got a whole different set of issues. But the industry is aware of it. So now what set us back a bit, I think, is the pandemic, because many of the research organizations that were working kind of on the cutting edge of some of this stuff were remissioned to look at medical mitigations for the pandemic. A number of the supercomputers that were focused on this were repivoted to medical uses. And so we don't have quite the focus on this we had prior to the pandemic, but we can wrap our head around this pandemic, then we'll certainly see a return with a vengeance to recycling. The world, I think, recognizes the problem with the buildup of trash, and the coverage on that plastic island that floats out there in the ocean has done a significant amount to convince folks that they really need to stop causing problems. The collapse of the cruise industry has had a surprisingly positive impact on the amount of plastics being introduced into the ocean. If you ever read up on the cruise industry, you'd never take a cruise again, just for the amount of damage it does to the environment. Of course, I've never really understood why you'd pay a ton of money to be locked on a boat for long periods of time without the ability to go and work, to go to other restaurants or whatever. But for those that love it, I guess they love it. But in the end, we do have to, I think, withdraw from some of these practices, these recreational practices that do so much environmental damage. And as I said, focus on the design of the products so that they can be recycled. And then governments, we're talking about governments, actually increasing the incentives for people that build products that can then be recycled. The issue we've got with much of this waste is it's just simply cheaper to throw the stuff away. And if you can change that economic advantage, then the industry will once again pivot to something that's economically more viable for them. And that's one of the best uses of taxes and tariffs, is to stop behavior that you don't want to occur, as opposed to just raise revenue. And so as governments come around to that idea and incentivize the building of more recyclable products, things will get better. We were talking about batteries, lithium-ion batteries, a few minutes ago, and lithium-ion is nasty stuff. It really, it's not environmentally friendly to mine. It's not environmentally friendly to dispose of, and a lot of the car companies really didn't start their recycling programs until after they started delivering the cars, which is a little bit ass backwards, if you'll excuse the term, because you really need to design that recycling capability into the product. Otherwise, it's just too expensive to strip it apart and get the material out and reuse it. And this is an industry driven by, fractions of pennies on margins. And so if it becomes more expensive to do, they probably won't do it. Now, most of the automotive industry has come around to the idea that you can recycle this stuff, and generation 4 and 5 batteries are much more recyclable than the earlier versions, but it's still a problem. So net, we have to design these products so they can be recycled. Governments have to incentivize doing that so the products are designed to be recycled. And then we need to fix the recycling program so that the incentives support the idea of recycling, and so that these both public and private agencies that do recycling can do so profitably.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. William and Professor Donalds.
Okay, well, if I may, I want to.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me or no? Hello.
Yes,
we can hear you.
I'm hearing you.
Okay, great. Rob, I'm so excited. Help was on its way. Now it's here, and it was a point that I made here, on this show, that I want to reiterate now. $4.4 trillion is the economic purchasing power each year for the United States federal government. And the Biden administration said within the first 11 days, we want to do buy right, buy American, buy environmental. So I know it's going to take a time for the ripple effect through the economy. But when, Rob, when you talk about, and you envision, and your colleagues, who I may never know, who are all well-meaning, and they were waiting for the day. And then those of us like me over here, getting gray hair, even though I color them, said, just, we're here now. Now, I don't know about 4.4 trillion each year purchasing power from the federal government. I know it's a small piece, but for the rest of the world, Dr. Sharif, for your policymakers, for your students, for everybody else out there, I said before, 17.6 trillion over 4 years. I did it on a blackboard back then. Now, my hope is that that is a clarion call. Like, let's ring the bell. We rang the bell. And I don't know that you can unring it. So I may not know, and I want to be clear here on international, tens of millions of people. I don't know is my answer. I don't know. Rob is better off. Professor Donald is better off. Alex is better off. I don't know. But what I do know is a direction has been sent. A decision has been made. And I still want to learn, at least on this episode, for everyone else. So I just want to ask this question. Rob, when you were talking about the influx of electric vehicles, and the different platforms, and they're moving off lithium into solid state batteries, at least Tesla.
Well, we hope to.
As I understand.
We don't have a viable solid state battery yet, but we're moving towards it. Kind of an extension of ultracapacitors. But that would really solve the problem. If we can move to a solid state technology, something along the lines of an ultracapacitor, those don't wear out, and they're they can both charge and get rid of the electricity much faster.
Except Rob, you're farther ahead than what other people understand. I only had to ask the question. What I need to do is explain to them what the difference is between where we are and solid state and how they can get there for the platform of all vehicles, which is what Ford Motor Company did. And then Alex, I'm going to listen to you, and Professor Donald, I'm going to listen to you, and Dr. Sharif, I really do not mean to get in the way.
So let's talk batteries. I was the top battery analyst for a number of years, so in the U.S. and turned out to be in the world for a while. And the problem with batteries is we stopped development on batteries somewhere in the 1940s, and it just let it languish. And so we're way the hell behind on energy storage. That's the nature of the beast. We started working on it again in the 90s, and then we really accelerated this century to try to solve a lot of these problems. But the issue we started off with was lead acid was pretty good. I mean, it was just it's always the problem with good enough. Lead acid, for whatever reason, we decided was good enough, and we locked in on that technology for way too long, and now we're kind of suffering through it because we can build engines that are really efficient. We can build energy delivery systems that are more efficient, but energy storage has been an issue. And in the last show, we talked a bit about using water, hydroelectric, as an energy storage medium, where you use the solar power to pump the water up, and then at night you use the hydroelectric to generate power, so you had 24-hour power supplies. Well, that was a really inefficient workaround, but a hell of a lot more efficient than some of the other things we were looking at, like liquid sodium. So the end result is we're suffering through this. We're probably going to be still suffering to a certain extent through the next decade about the fact we just didn't spend enough time working on batteries before then. Now, solid state batteries are kind of the holy grail. If we can get to solid state, we get to the point where the batteries don't wear out. Lithium ion wears out. The more time you use it, the less viable it is. It's the dirty secret with regard to electric cars, that those batteries that are in them, they don't last the decade they're supposed to last. Depending on how much you drive and how often you use the high-powered direct chargers, they will degrade relatively quickly. And if you had a laptop computer, you kind of know that at 3 years, you've lost an awful lot of that battery capacity. And then what happens to that battery when you get rid of it? Most laptops today don't even have removable batteries, and so you dispose of the entire thing, which of course is not all that environmentally friendly. So the goal here is to really get to a technology that is not only more efficient than lithium-ion, which shouldn't be hard. Though here's another concern that people don't talk about a lot with regard to electric cars. Lithium-ion has 1/3 the energy density of dynamite. That's less than gasoline, but it's still something that can take your house out. And I know that because I had an electric bicycle, and the battery pack, lithium-ion battery pack, went up, and $10,000 worth of damage to my garage later. And realizing that it was only because I was fire trained years ago that I got the fire out, I might have lost my house. The stuff is nasty when it catches fire, and if anybody that has an electric car, you really do need to read up on how to put out an electric fire, because a lot of the fire crews still don't know how to do that. And what you have to remember is you've got to cool off that battery pack first and foremost, otherwise the batteries go into a cascading failure, and lithium-ion burns hot enough to melt aluminum. So which for years kept me incredibly worried about one of those damn things, one of the battery packs going off on a plane. And we've had a couple go off, but so far not bring a plane down. I'll tell you a quick story I had with the then CEO of one of the PC companies. I was actually on a romantic night with my wife. We're sitting by the jacuzzi, and I got a call from Michael Dell telling me to fix Lenovo, because Lenovo wasn't recalling the batteries that were catching fire. And the CEO of Lenovo was telling me, no, we've got this technology that will protect us, that won't go on. I said, no, that's not the case. The batteries are going up because there's metal inside the batteries that are causing a short, and you're going to have another fire. And he refused to do the recall. That night, a Lenovo battery went up, almost burned down the guy's house. They did the recall the next day. But that's the issue with regard to the batteries. They're not particularly safe. They do carry an awful lot of energy, and they're nasty to dispose of. So we can get to solid state batteries. That will really do an awful lot for the extent for the green aspects of electric cars. Now, I also mentioned the other day, another problem with electric cars is the fact we don't have enough energy capacity, and our overcapacity is petrochemical fired power plants, oil fired power plants, which are not particularly clean at all. And the Trump administration rolled back the controls on those plants. Those are being reinstated now, but we really have to think about, as we move to electrics, especially broad electrics, we have to get our clean electrical capacity up. Otherwise, they won't be that clean at all at the end. We need to be generating clean power desperately. Now, back to recycling. We do need the industry to move forward with this idea of being able to reuse many of the components in the cars. Electrical engines or electric motors are very different than ICE engines. They last for a long time, and you don't have to go through and do the rebuilds you have to do on ICE engines. So in theory, a Tesla could be viable 100 years out, where if you have a gas-powered car, it won't be viable 100 years out unless you almost rebuild every component. All the rotor parts have to be replaced, and all the rest of it have to be done in the sail and piston rings and bearings. It's a lot of stuff that because it's not reciprocating, an electric motor doesn't go through. It's a relatively low stress, and it's high torque and high power. So all the wonderful things we would like in an engine plant, if we could just fix the damn battery problem. And that's really where much of the recycling risk is in electric cars, because lithium-ion is kind of nasty to get rid of as well.
Thank you. Professor Donald, I think you want to add some point. Can you unmute yourself?
You're muted. Donald, you're muted.
I got it. I'm unmuted now. It's fascinating listening to this. I was interested in the recycling aspect of it, so I read up on it, and I found that there's 3 types of recycling, and one of them is to take something and recycle it and have it do what it already does. The next aspect of it is to take something and use it for something in the same way. So that would be the example, I think, of using tires to cover roads. Tires are basically petroleum. Roads, the tar that you use on roads is petroleum. And then last is taking the recycled material and using it for something completely different than what it was before. And I looked up what Alex was talking about upcycling, and it was really kind of funny because I have a friend who she's got an amazing job. She translates American English to Canadian English for the user interfaces at a computer company. I think that's amusing, actually. But she has gotten into recycling bowls. So what she does is she gets old, worn out bowls and fixes them up and turns them into super beautiful bowls as an art project that she sells. I don't know. I know right now that the batteries, the solid state batteries, I just looked it up. They cost about $100,000 for one little battery, and it requires 1,000 of them for a car. So there's going to be some excitement about getting the prices of those down. I have no doubt that they will. It's Moore's law is definitely going to apply here, and as there gets to be scale and better understanding of what it does, the batteries are going to come down. The one thing that I always think when I'm listening to this is I really appreciate what people have been saying about the whole idea of incentives, because Alex mentioned that people don't, the 5 cents for to recycle something just isn't enough for people to be wanting to do it. You make $60 an hour, what's 5 cents? If you spend a minute at it, you've lost money. And so that's a question I really don't know how to address, because as Rob pointed out, recycling centers are negative, and cities are having to actually abandon them. Cities are just stopping doing recycling because it's so expensive, they can't afford to do it. So I think, to me, that's kind of the most interesting thing, and I don't really know what kind of incentives that we can do to make that wind up happening right now, except perhaps in punitive ones at a government level. So that's something I'd love to hear more about from you guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Alex. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. To answer Donald's question, I think that does come down to governmental laws and regulations, and it was the government that changed the whatever policy that allowed those containers in Europe or throughout Europe to be 25 cents or 30 cents. I don't know. It's a lot. So when you go into the grocery store, you're paying more money for that initial product, but it encourages you or gives you more incentive to turn it back in. Another thing that we're doing, we're doing the wrong way is, again, voting with our money. We're voting wrong. As Rob mentioned earlier, with all the drains getting clogged with, it's basically these hand wipes, and it's happening around the United States, probably happening around the world, where our septic systems are being clogged from all the hand wipes. Now, those hand wipes are not biodegradable. They're derived from fossil fuels. It's some sort of polyester or nylon fabric. And it's clogging the waterway. So they're doing that because it's a cheap product, and it's not part of our circular economy. If we continue to vote with our money and continue to buy stuff that is not just made from recycled material, but it's also recyclable, I think that's going to continue to encourage and support the circular economy. So I have a note right here about ice. And for those of you watching, Rob did mention a ICE vehicle, and I just wanted to clarify that that stands for internal combustion engine. So that's the, you know, so anytime someone says ICE, it basically means that it's running off fossil fuels, and it has a combustion engine and it burns fossil fuels. So I don't hear people use that term as often, but that was that. So as far as all of the cars and our transition towards electric cars, already I, you know, just through my regional or global travels, I have seen people all over that own these properties, and they just have like a lot of abandoned cars on their properties. I saw a lot of abandoned cars on the remote island of Vieques in Puerto Rico. I've seen them in Mexico, and I've seen them, you know, up here in the Santa Cruz Mountains on people's property. So all of those cars, whether, you know, it's a junkyard, or you got 5 cars on your property or 10 cars, that's like almost like raw material. That's a resource, and they actually pay sometimes when the metal prices are higher, they pay around 150, 200 per car. When it's lower for metal prices, you know, on the stock market, that's about $75 a car. But all of that material, if we took it to the facilities, they would, you know, what do? They crush it, and then they recycle it back into raw material, and they pay for that material, and then that eliminates us from extracting new material. So as far as glass, if we had like better glass recycling programs, we would be recycling the glass to make new glass, and the overall environmental impact and the energy that goes into melting down the glass would be much less, especially if we had universal standards, you know, the basic colors, the basic shapes and logos, and that would eliminate us from extracting new material, raw material. And correct me if I'm wrong, but glass comes from sand, right? And we're already seeing global sand shortages around the world, especially when it's incorporated with concrete. A lot of environmentalists, and even me, I was against this place that's been illegally extracting sand right here in the Monterey Bay for the last decade, and there's been fines and court dates, court hearings, penalties, and they keep extracting it. So that's eroding the entire coastline right here in the Bay Area, which will be amplified when we continue to see the devastating effects of rising ocean sea levels. So when we continue to recycle glass and all of that, it's important. I have had the chance to take a tour of multiple dumps or waste management facilities, both here in Santa Cruz and the Reno, Nevada area. And it is interesting how they do have an area for the tires, for the sheetrock, for refrigerators to extract the refrigerant. They have areas for concrete and bricks, and they do have a really good separation process, but that does depend on if China or another country is willing to purchase those raw materials. I was in Ghana, and there's a huge recycling program in Ghana. I do believe they get a lot of our electronics that they then melt down and recycle to extract the raw materials and the gold from all the electronics. Now, when we're talking about recycling and in Ghana, there are some really informative documentaries that shows the impact of recycling, and these people without the proper protective equipment, PPE, they don't have face masks, they don't have goggles, they're not wearing gloves, and they're working with these chemicals and these toxins with their bare hands, not being informed, and because there's no regulation. So I do think that we need more governmental or non-governmental oversight, looking into, you know, what's being recycled where, making sure that we're not using child labor practices, making sure the working conditions are safe for those people. I'm going to mention the different types of batteries. I did bring up a graphic up there because when we think of batteries, maybe the average person's like, okay, there's one type of battery or 3 types, but there's actually a lot of types. There's the ones that are rechargeable, ones that are like semi-rechargeable, and then not rechargeable. I will try to send a link to that, or if you just Google search different types of batteries. It's good to know these different types because some of them have, like, let's say AA. Some of them have a really long shelf life if you're going to use it for an emergency or for your flashlight. But some of those are more environmentally impacting than if you're just going to use it something immediately, then you would purchase a different type of AA or AAA battery. So just knowing the difference of the expiration date of batteries, which ones are more toxic, will help us vote with our money better. Some of the main batteries for vehicles are lead acid, and they pay approximately $10. Well, lead prices are down approximately $7 for lead acid batteries, here in California, because they recycle it back into new batteries. They extract that lead because lead is higher on the stock market when it comes to metal. So lead acid is one type of car battery, and they're used in solar systems. Above that is a deep cycle. I have purchased way in the past. I've had a lead acid battery for my solar system, and then I upgraded to a deep cycle. They last longer, so you can get more charges out of it. Lead acid batteries are for the cranking amps to start your vehicles. Deep cycles are different because you can drain them down further and charge them, so they're good for solar systems. If you can afford it, gel cells are where they're sealed. It's more of a sealed battery, so there's less off-gassing, and they do last longer. They're more expensive, and if you have a solar system, the most expensive batteries are lithium batteries. You can get a huge lithium battery for solar systems. I don't know as much about the recycling when it comes to lithium, but one of the reasons why we've progressed so fast into understanding batteries in the last 10 to 15 years is because of our electronics, not just because of our cordless drills and our laptops and video game system, whatever batteries use, remote control cars. I think cell phones have been a huge a driver when it comes to understanding batteries and all of that. So to answer William's question earlier on about us transitioning towards electric cars, I do think there's going to be a large there is going to be a percentage of people that are resistant. The people with the car, oh, it's a classic, or it's an antique, or I love it, or there's going to be the people that just have a difficult time with our transition towards global sustainability. And we see these people, throughout everything we're trying to do to help make the world a better place. So I'm sure that there's going to be laws in place or regulation where certain cars are going to be grandfathered in. And I just think that happens, throughout our society. A lot of things get grandfathered in, even when it comes to different guns and different laws and regulations. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. I do want to emphasize, I mentioned it earlier, and this is very important to know this. So I'm just going to go over it one more time. So there's this greenwashing thing happening, and it's about compostable products. And we see that in the plates and the spoons, the utensils and stuff in the grocery stores, and it says compostable. So that is a form of greenwashing, but it is like a step in the right direction. But it's confusing to people because they think this utensil is compostable, but like Donald mentioned, it does disrupt the recycling process. Those utensils that say compostable get mixed in with recyclables, whether it's at the city dump or the county dump, it confuses the system because it's not the same type of plastic. And so it messes that up. And at the same time, it's not compostable in the form that you can't just throw it in your garden. You can't bury it, in the dirt, and it's not going to compost. So those have to go to industrial composting facilities. And that's where the pile of compost, they make sure it reaches a higher threshold or temperature to break down the material in those compostable utensils. And here in Santa Cruz, we don't have those industrial composters. So it's, again, like all of the utensils, everything that they sell is just a form of greenwashing. And I don't think that it's a step in the right direction, but just be cautious of that. When I was in Villegas, like a week and a half, 2 weeks after Hurricane Maria, it was directly hit with Maria. It was devastating there for everyone in the community. When I went there, I saw that they had an unregulated dump that was the size of our dump here, and it was like less than a mile away from the ocean and right next to a river. And I know that because I looked at it on Google Earth and I looked at how close it is to the ocean. And again, Vieques is this island that's only like 11 miles wide, 22 miles long, and they had a dump, a massive dump. So when a hurricane comes through, everything ended up in the dump. There was no recycling at all. Nothing was recycled. It all went into the dump. And I have this really devastating picture where it like shows the ocean and the forest and then this huge pile of everything from people's homes that was in this big pile. So we don't have good recycling around the world. In Vieques, people used to collect their batteries, their AA's, their AAA's, and actually take them on the ferries back to the main island just because they were concerned about the environmental impact. And we do need to spend more time towards recycling solutions because it's a huge problem and we need to implement
Thank you.
solutions.
Dr. William,
Yeah,
you want
thank
to
you.
add some point?
I mean, don't mind me. I want to bring this kind of back if I can, without stuff. And that is this. For the policymakers, for the students that are out there, what your challenge is essentially this. You have Dr. Sharif, you have Professor Donald, you have Rob, and then you have Alex. How do you put all this together? This idea, that idea, this observation. You have human interest, human behavior from Professor Donald. You have Rob with his notions about what works, what doesn't. You have Alex describing what is on the ground, like boots on the ground, real-time stuff. For policymakers, how do you put it all together? How do you make sense of it in a way that balances everything? And this is why it's a very exciting time, because oftentimes you toil in the darkness. You can only, write papers, develop books for other people to read. Maybe 20 years later, they might find your name in a footnote. But now, today, what we have is we have a real live, energetic conversation where Rob. We got to listen to Rob. We got to listen to Professor Donald. And then we love Alex only because he just won't let it go. And so I want to say that we and you as policymakers, both in government or students, are in a renaissance period where we can grab all these ideas where people are ready, willing, and able to say yes. And that, I can sit here and do whatever, and I can get angry about this thing or that thing, and oftentimes I do. But now it's not that time. I just want to point out how this day, this moment, because I am so optimistic that I can listen to
Thank you.
Rob. I can listen to Alex.
Thank you.
I can listen to Donald. I'm sorry, Dr. Sharif. Don't mind me. I say
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Turn.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. William.
No, you just said goodbye to me. So I mean, I'm fine. I think I did my. So
Okay.
I think probably Rob or Professor Donald or you. I mean, what do you think about it, Dr. Sharif, from where you're coming from? Don't mind me asking.
Yes. No, definitely. Actually, recycling is a big important issue. But yes, you are correct. Like we discussed that previously, especially from developed nations, many wastes and other things they forward to India, even in China, even in Malaysia and these kind of countries. And what I can remember from different kind of conference and the policy discussions, and as I get chance to attend some meeting with the energy ministry of different countries, I observed previously that now they are not accepting this kind of recycling things to these developing nations like China, Malaysia, Indonesia, these kind of countries. So beside that, we know that there are many technologies and many things happening, especially for the recycling, waste management, waste to energy. Personally, I do some very important feasibility studies in a few countries for developing waste to energy projects, and it's actually moving right now. Some of the big corporations right now, they are investing on this project. But fact is that I think that we need to transfer more technology, as well as we need more investment in this point. But beside that, this is my understanding, my observations from my practical experience, that when we're discussing about recycling and this kind of things, I think still we have to do a lot more research. We need a lot more technological innovations, and we need huge investment from the corporations, or impact investment and other things. Because from my personal experience, I saw too much of failures and in this industry. That is the fact, because I am very much industry oriented, not only academy. I personally visited different kind of places where actually waste dump, different city I visited, many remote area cities I personally visited. With the help of World Bank, I finished some feasibility study, and one project actually moving right now. But still, in a practical sense, yes, we can discuss about Tesla, this, that, many things. Practical things is completely different, and still we need to do a lot more focus. That's why when I discuss with Mr. Alex, my friend, I say, oh yes, this is very good topic we can discuss. But practically we need many investment. Even example, I have a big question: if USA has too much of good technology, why they have to send their wastes to China or in Malaysia? Why then they cannot do the recycling in their own country? I don't know.
Well,
I love to learn.
yeah. So the reason is we lost much of our manufacturing capacity. So the ability to remanufacture the stuff just doesn't exist here. And at least initially, China was willing to take that garbage and at least attempt to do something with it. And then they discovered a lot of the stuff we were sending them, you really couldn't do anything with. It was not recyclable material. The stories of those film baby diapers are going to stick with me for the rest of my life. We just started dumping stuff on China, and they just said, "Forget it. We don't want your garbage. We've agreed to recycle the stuff." And then the market for recyclable materials just collapsed. And we didn't have the infrastructure here to manufacture it.
Then the tariffs, Rob. Don't mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Well, that's how government deals with stuff. It should deal with stuff like this. Taxes and tariffs should be used as incentives and disincentives to behavior that you want to encourage or discourage. And that's not something we do well any place in the world, as far as I can tell, except maybe in some of the Norwegian countries. But at the end, this is where government does need to play a pretty heavy role to make sure that it is profitable to do recycling, because as long as recycling becomes unprofitable, then you're asking people that are measured on the profitability of their companies to trade off their bonus to do something right. And I'm not a big believer in that. You put people in conflict and they will often make bad decisions. You want to make the easy decision, the right decision. If you make the easy decision, the hard decision, it's going to be a problem. Here in the United States, we have two parties. We've got the Republican Party that seems to believe that nothing's really going on, everything's hunky-dory. And we've got the Democratic Party that wants to do stuff fast, but not well. And so the end result is you get these stop and start disasters of programs that often do more harm than good from the Democrats, and then the Republicans just pretend the problem doesn't exist. And often it looks like their strategy is the best because at least it wasn't embarrassing. So we have to get to the point where we're doing the right thing for the right reasons and thinking through the strategic impact of whatever it is we're doing, and not thinking about the optics. Doing recycling because it looks good is not the reason you do recycling. Doing recycling because it's helping the planet or because it's economically viable, or viable should be the reason that we're doing this stuff, because that's sustainable. The optics vary, month to month, year to year, and can be a problem. I can tell you a personal story. Back when Jimmy Carter was president, one of the wealthiest parts of my own family decided to go into solar energy big time. And then he was a one-term president. Reagan came in, collapsed the programs, and the wealthiest part of my family suddenly became the poorest side of the family because they bet on a more sustainable energy choice. And you can't have that kind of stuff happen because it discourages the underlying efforts. And so when it comes to recycling, it starts with government incentives. It starts by really putting people in power that have the what do I want to say, the willingness to make strategic decisions that may extend beyond their term. And that continues to be one of the biggest problems with making true progress long term, is everybody either wants a quick fix or wants to pretend there isn't a problem. And that doesn't really get us anyplace.
Dr. William, you want to add some point?
No, actually, I wanted to defer to Professor Donald, because
Okay.
nothing
Yes, Professor Donald.
going to add to anything that
Yes.
Rob said. Professor Donald.
Well, I think that there's like what we should do and what we do. And how many people here have ever tried to lose weight or change habits? We have all the best intentions, but it sometimes is extremely difficult to do. Our human body and human brains are very, very conservative, and they want to keep doing whatever it is that they're doing and to try and change them. When you're in a social structure where everybody's doing the same thing, you've got the added problem is that if you try and change, everyone around you is going to try and get you not to change because they want you to stay the way that you are. And so there's this huge amount of inertia that's taking place. And I'm mentioning this because I came across an article in Science, which is a magazine, if you're not familiar with it, from the American Association of Science. It's one of the most well-regarded scientific journals. And this was just a couple days last week where they talked about some studies that were done about global warming and climate change and what kinds of things make a difference. And lo and behold, it turns out that having discussions like this wind up having a positive feedback loop, because people become aware of things that they didn't really realize in a non-confrontive way, like they're just listening to it. Okay, so they're not having to fight with anybody about it or argue with anybody about it, and they get curious. And there's Wikipedia. Everybody can get Wikipedia. You look at Wikipedia and you look something up, and it changes you just a little bit because you start saying, "Oh," and they said there's nothing that they've found that works quite as well as discussing it and talking about it. So I bring that up to just compliment you, Sharif, on being able to bring all these elements together. Again, it boils down to incentives. And what I think of the idea that I know in some countries where poor people go to the trash dumps and pick through them to find stuff that could be of value. I mean, it's terrible on their health, but that's a form of recycling. It's a form that has economic incentives. And so the issue gets to be, if you're a country that doesn't have enough money to educate everybody, doesn't have enough money for healthcare for everybody, like the United States, at least people claim that that's the case. But it's hard to imagine, it's hard to think about going out and, doing recycling and it's hard to think about the benefits of the earth when you're local. So people think about their own little place in the world, and the United States has this whole new thing about Buy American and how it's just how we should just be insular and do everything ourselves. And that's the kind of thinking that is going to make it difficult for people to think how what they do affects, you throw away a plastic bottle and how it's affecting somebody somewhere in the absolute opposite side of the world that you'll never meet. You wouldn't understand their language. You don't know anything about them. And the only thing that I think is really helpful that they found, well, not the only thing, but one of the things they found that's really helpful is to have discussions like this. So I'm really interested to listen to the expertise, especially of people like Rob and Alex and Dr. William, who have their boots on the ground.
Thank you. Mr. Alex.
Yes, I would like to thank Donald for mentioning those three types of recycling, those categories that you brought up. Upcycling and keeping it the same thing, and yeah, that was informative. So I did just look online at upcycling, and I would just really encourage anyone watching this video to Google image search upcycling. Just there's so many people doing a lot of really cool things. I mean, they're changing furniture to different things, and with jeans, with pallets, with car tires, and a lot of these things that we have an abundance of, and they're turning them into either new furniture or new clothes or new art pieces or garden projects or things to grow food. So anytime you upcycle something that we already have, it eliminates us from having to again extract that raw material from the environment, because again, we live on a planet with finite resources. So yeah, a lot of really cool images. I mean, I could send an image or two to Sharif, that he would post on this, but there's just so many cool images. I think upcycling will be the future in developing countries, with making money to help their economy, to create new jobs. Downtown Santa Cruz, I did see this one guy that was from Kenya, and he was on the sidewalk, and he made so many different things out of aluminum cans, Coca-Cola, Pepsi cans, and it was really creative. He not only made the little cars and little planes and stuff like that, he was making animals, little giraffes and everything. So it was cool that he was able to upcycle these aluminum cans into creating art. And not was it just art, but it also helped raise awareness of some of the animals in Africa. And he was doing it for some fundraiser, some nonprofit. So if you are in a developing country, if you're watching this video, I do think that there's a huge market for selling upcycled products, because we are going to continue our transition to purchasing sustainably, and there's a lot of sustainable options when it comes to that. So I've had this idea in the past. This is separate. I just know people take stuff to Goodwill and donation centers, Salvation Army, local thrift shops. They donate it, and then the thrift shop sells it, and they turn it into either a profit, or they donate a large percentage of the money to a nonprofit to help make the world a better place. I don't understand, especially here in America, why we don't have donation centers or substations like they do in different places here in my community. Why do they not have that right by the dump? So when people are going in with that, that extra dresser or nightstand or lamp before they take it to the dump, it's like the last ditch effort, to drop it off. And then there would be someone at that donation center that would say, no, that is trash. Take it to the dump. No, that's recyclable. Not here. But there should be someone there directing where things go better, or just taking in donations so they could go back into the economy and they're not going to end up in a landfill. I think that we're going to look back, whether it's in 5 years, 15 years, 20 years. I think we're going to look back and we're going to be like, why were we taking all of this material, all of these resources, and dumping them into the environment and throwing dirt on top of it? That just doesn't make any sense. Like, I think that not only should there be just better separation, I think in the future, we may be going back into the dumps like they are doing in different countries around the world. And they're digging through those dumps, looking for raw metals and looking for stuff that they can recycle. Because, yeah, again, we're on a planet with finite resources. I think that in the future, we need to have long assembly lines before anything goes into the dump. I think we need to incorporate artificial intelligence with technology and robotics and automation to go in there with hands and arms and separation. And these machines need to separate everything into more categories. This will replace jobs which is unfortunate, the human resource, but I think this will help keep people safe from cutting themselves on anything sharp, glass or anything like that. Just separating things more efficiently, like in an assembly line, so we can get some of those metals out, some of the glass, some of the recyclable plastic, some of the chemicals, so it doesn't all just go right back into the landfills. Through this conversation, I have not heard mention of the fishing industry and their devastating impact on in regards to the global pollution crisis. Unfortunately, it's trickier to get that out of the ocean and recycle it correctly. I was in Norway a few years ago, and I went with a nonprofit to a really distant, remote island, and between I don't know, it was like 7 or 9 of us, we cleaned up like 3 pickup loads worth of trash within an hour, and a lot of it was just fishing nets and fishing equipment. So that is nice that some of these nonprofits, some of these companies are taking fishing material and upcycling them. I think Adidas is taking the fishing nets and they're turning them into shoes, and other companies. So anytime any of us, the consumer, we have the chance to vote with our money, we should look to see if it's made from recycled material, so we're not using raw material. In the past, I don't know if I agree with this or not, but in the past, you go to the city landfill here in Santa Cruz County, and they would take all of the paint, the different types of paint, they would mix all the white together, all the gray together, all the brown. So, and you could buy 5 gallons. It was like $5 or $10. And my stepdad used to do that rather than going, to Home Depot or Lowe's or Orchard Supply or some of the local home improvement stores to purchase fresh paint. So you're getting that paint that you're going to paint your house. So instead of it going into a landfill, you're supporting that recycling process. One of the reasons why I think there's not why we're shipping so many of these recyclables to different places around the world. It's not just because we don't have the human resources. It's not just because we don't want to do it. I think it's part of the selfish reason that we here in America, we have, how do I say it's selfish? People work for really cheap in different places around the world where they make, $2 a day, $5 a day, and they can recycle things and sort through stuff that we send to them for a lot cheaper than they would here in the United States, even in some of the states that have a really low minimum wage. So I think that's one of the reasons why I could be corrected, why we ship that. Another reason is sometimes recycling stuff is really toxic. That's why we're sending, some of these electronics to places like Ghana and other developing countries around the world, because we don't want to deal with the toxic aspect of it. We also have EPA laws, restrictions, regulations, red tape, OSHA that overlooks some of this stuff in the United States. And I think our mentality here in America is just like out of sight, out of mind. Let them deal with the problem. We created it, we collected it. Now we're going to send it to them to deal with it. I do think we need to continue to produce things with whole products. That's whether it's whole glass, solid plastics, solid metal. So we have more incentive to collect that, to recycle it back into new goods. And I think that would help the market. And right now we're just making things with like a lot of cheap products, and that's why it's not worth recycling. So yeah, I have that. And again, I think just voting with our money and somehow from a policy level, implementing higher initial, what's that called? CRV on beverage containers. I think that would really solve a lot of things like they're doing in Europe. Instead of us paying 5 cents, we pay 25 cents when we first get that container. So we have more incentive to turn it back in. I think that would really help with the whole circular economy aspect of recycling. That's all.
Thank you. I think that I'm just sharing one of the write-up of Mr. Rob. So we will go for the concluding remarks, but we want to know some points from this article, especially he is writing on getting sustainability right. Okay, so Mr. Rob, how do you want to share your write-up with our audience? And
Well, one of the ways you get people doing the sustainability efforts properly is you look for folks that are doing it properly and you give them credit for it. Right now in my segment, HP is probably, they're ranked #1, so they are arguably the leader in recycling, mostly on the printer side of the company. That they do use ocean-borne plastics in their laptop PCs. The thing is, though, is that what makes them different is they've taken these green efforts and driven them into their culture. So they get support from the top executives and the rank and file. This particular method has worked well at other companies like Cisco, who are focused on things like homelessness and focusing on the global poverty. In each case, the more you engage the employees and the executives, the more sustainable the overall program is, and the more able you are to keep it going. HP, I've had a chance a while back to go see the Sims Recycling Solutions, where much of the recycling for HP, and strangely enough, though this isn't talked about enough, Dell partners with them, and Dell's doing much of the recycling at Sims Recycling as well. It's a very large company that handles recycling of electronics across the United States, and they do a great deal to keep a lot of this stuff from going into landfills. Some of the results that have happened through these efforts is a conversion of packaging materials to moving from plastics to paper, which will degrade and can be recycled. Those have all driven through driven through the entire industry. So I highlight HP, and I think other companies that do this extremely well should be highlighted and given credit, so that their peers emulate the behavior and they're driven by status. Because everyone knows we can't tax; it's only by the government or provide monetary incentives. But if it drives more business to them, it will work. And we've certainly seen studies with regard to millennials in particular, where they will favor companies that have a sustainable agenda and are ranked highly with sustainability, which does drive revenue to those companies and creates incentives for them to behave properly. But anyway, that's the nature of the article. HP took this much more aggressively than most. Granted, they have in their printers a lot of disposable material that should be recycled, and so they had a higher need than most as well. But their execution has been market leading, and so that the article pointed to the fact that we should give them credit for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Rob. Dr. William, what are the concluding remarks you want to add?
No, I was going to defer to Professor Donald, and please come back to me, and I'll be okay. Don't mind me. I'm listening. I'm learning.
Okay. Thank you. Professor Donald, what are the concluding remarks you want to add? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I did. Rob made me smile because my landlord, his job is he's a sustainability officer for Hewlett Packard, and he flies all around the world helping Hewlett Packard do sustainable things. I don't completely understand what he does, but he loves his job. I really agree with Rob that it goes back to what I was saying. These discussions give us ways of starting to put pressure, and the Nestle's and Coca-Cola have a huge commitment to saving water. And Nestle's is a bad guy because they're taking water from California at incredibly cheap prices, and we don't have enough water. But nevertheless, they have gone to a lot of trouble. And we just heard about Coca-Cola redoing their packaging. All of these kinds of things wind up happening if we manage to be aware of it and let the companies know, as Alex keeps saying, vote with our money. So I think that the best thing that we can all do is just spend some time learning a little bit more about all these things, and that at the core, the problem is the reason that we have to outsource the recycling and things like that is that there's not very good financial incentive to be able to do the recycling. And so that's why putting pressure on the companies by buying things creates a financial incentive for them, And then I also suggest that people go to their governments and to their elected officials and encourage things like Alex was talking about, higher basically charges for the bottles, for things like being able to try and figure out how your city taxes are going to be able to go separating the garbage, because you can't separate it right now sometimes. I mean, if you have like something that you want to recycle and it's got organic material on it, they have to just throw it away. And so that something that I'm constantly encouraging is anybody out there that can start figuring out ways to solve these problems are going to have fabulous businesses that are going to make a huge amount of difference in the future. So I encourage people to, we've said so many times that a good business is solving a problem. And so at this point, there's a lot more problems in this area than there are solutions. So I think it's an ideal place to really start looking at it. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Concluding remarks.
Sorry, you cut out. Was that for me?
Mr. Alex?
Okay, sorry. Okay, so some of the things I would like to mention in my concluding remark. World Battery Day. Sorry, I think it's just called Battery Day. It was, I'm pretty sure it was put on or organized by Elon Musk, or it's from Tesla. Is that correct, Rob? You've heard of Battery Day? Tesla's Battery Day, I think. It's so it's where they just talk about batteries, work on batteries. A lot of it's open source again. So that's on February 18th, I believe. And maybe it's February. Maybe, okay, so I'm gonna double check that. So Google search Battery Day, please. It's really cool. So we can all learn more about batteries and what's being recycled, what's not, electric cars, and that's a step in the right direction. Next subject, Sims. There is a Sims right here, well, about 20, 30 miles from where I'm located, in San Jose, in Silicon Valley. Rob just mentioned Sims. Sims, I didn't realize is, throughout the United States. It's a recycling facility, and it's a big recycling facility. They recycle a lot of stuff. They have, those big cranes that, pick up all the metal and drop it off. So they have huge piles of plastic, huge piles of metal. They recycle cars. That's one of the places that does accept cars, and then they crush them. And it's a cool facility to check out. I've been there a few times. I have recycled stuff there. So they're part of the solution. And because they accept different things, they actually accept different types of metal, not just if you take a car, if you take cans, bottles, glass, they take copper, brass, aluminum, raw metal, and you take it in and then they weigh it and then they give you money. I've taken some batteries there and they recycled them correctly when I was in the area. And it's a cool place to visit if you're in the area. Maybe they do tours and stuff, or if you want to, work in the recycling sector, I recommend researching more about Sims. And I do want to thank Rob for all of the insight that you had on this particular subject. I thought he brought a lot of really great things into the conversation, really knowledgeable of some of these topics. I didn't mention as much about green packaging, but again, when we're buying stuff, we don't necessarily have to buy stuff that's glass or plastic. There's a lot of good solutions. It's not just the stuff that says compostable, that's like that plastic type compostable. There's also the paper compostable versions of stuff that we're seeing in a lot of the to-go containers here, which I think is the new standard. To where it is from like recycled paper. I think that we need to continue to buy things that are made from hemp and bamboo and different types of organic materials. So we're just using or hopefully using less chemicals in the manufacturing processes of creating those. Because then if it does get littered, if it ends up in the environment, if it doesn't make it to a recycling facility or a landfill, it will just biodegrade and go back into the environment. Now, again, for those watching, I do think this is a good place for opportunity, regardless if it's learning more about recycling, green packaging, or upcycling. I think this is going to be this is the direction of the world. We're going to find more and more people are going to be voting with their money. More policymakers are going to start putting in place different laws and regulations regarding, like I just said, here in Santa Cruz, or maybe throughout California, but definitely like Santa Cruz, all of, like, the to-go containers, they can't be what's that, styrofoam. They have to be biodegradable now. So it's just you could be ahead of the curve. You could watch this video, you could do the research, and start your own company, your own small business, get involved with upcycling, and thrive and be prosperous. That's all. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. William, your concluding remarks for today?
Yes, if you don't mind. I want to excuse me, let me clear my throat. We are at an inflection point where we are collecting all the ideas. They're all on the table. You've heard them. From this point or that point. This idea, that idea, big, small, or just, middle of the road. What I do know is this. I don't know that I've been more excited in my life, and I'm only 52, than this time that says, Sharif, Dr. Sharif, you're 10 million people, your students, your policymakers, the people you collect here that watch, ought to be listening to everybody else. I can, argue on any particular point, but today I have nothing to argue about because I agree from coast to coast, with this one exception. I do not believe all the ideas emanate from California, even though I grew up there in San Francisco and went to college in LA. But there are hardworking people in Buffalo, New York, where they have to make things. All the ideas, where boots to the ground, where it's got to make sense. Just like across Pan Asia, it's got to make sense. Boots on the ground. We can talk and say, but boots on the ground. However, you know what I know about them? Optimistic people. They all have the same vision. They just need to know how. And to my erstwhile friends, they need you to tell them how it's all going to make sense. Any arguments I may have are for another day. This administration, I'm just hoping for. And I'm glad to be back, and I'm sorry I was missing. And thank God we're not talking about the impeachment. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rob. Thank you for sharing many of informative articles, as well as we saw that you have a very good write-up. So definitely, World Talent Economy Forum, we are arranging different kind of conference and scientific issues. So your support also important. Beside that, we have Professor Donalds, Mr. Alex, Dr. Williams, and many of the speakers from around the world. Hopefully, with the help of your support and everything, we will arrange some of the big conference and summit this year. Already we are working on these things, and thank you everyone, those who are watching and those who are supporting World Talent Economy Forums. Hopefully next week we will come up with the many interesting topics, and all of the speakers will come up with many idea, information, strategy. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. Mr. Rob, Dr. William, Professor Donalds, Mr. Alex, thank you everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Sharif.
you,
Thank you.
Sharif.
Bye-bye.
Always
Thank you.
nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Take care.